Picture this, January 28, 2026. A private jet carrying one of India's most powerful politicians literally falls out of the sky. The crash of Ajit Pawar's plane. Well, it wasn't just a tragedy. It was an event that would completely shake up the political landscape. So let's break down what really happened on that foggy morning in Baramati.
I mean, just listen to that. That's the chilling account from someone who was right there, on the ground. It just captures the pure, raw shock of the moment. Can you imagine seeing an aircraft coming down, you know something's not right, and then that? This wasn't some distant news headline. For the people there, it was a horrifying reality.
In the first few moments, the reports were just chaotic, but as the smoke started to clear, a truly devastating picture began to emerge. All right, let's get into the hard facts of what happened.
So here are the basics. A Learjet 45, coming in for a landing at Baramati Airport, but it never makes it. The impact was catastrophic, and the grim reality is there were no survivors. 5 lives, just gone in an instant.
And this is why it became such a huge story. This wasn't just any flight. On board was Ajit Pawar, the Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, a real political heavyweight. His death, along with his staff and the flight crew, immediately turned this from a tragic accident into a national crisis.
Okay, so to really figure out why this happened, investigators had to become detectives. They had to piece together the aircraft's final frantic moments using flight data, cockpit recordings, and communication logs to rebuild the last 34 minutes of flight VTSSK.
In this timeline, well, it tells a really tense story. The first landing attempt gets called off. The pilots just can't see the runway, so they circle around, they try again. This time, they report seeing the runway, they get the all clear to land. And then, nothing. Just radio silence. A minute later, the control tower sees a fireball. The question everyone wants an answer to is what went so catastrophically wrong in those last 60 seconds?
So you heard that term go around in the timeline. What is that exactly? Well, it's basically a pilot hitting the abort button on a landing. It's a standard procedure, sure, but it's never casual. It tells you that the pilots are facing a really tough situation. In this case, it's a huge clue that they were struggling in that fog, and they knew it.
And here's what investigators started to figure out pretty quickly. This wasn't some single freak accident. No, this was a classic chain reaction. A deadly combination of factors and conditions that all lined up at the worst possible moment.
And when you look at the contributing factors, it's like a recipe for disaster. You've got 4 huge problems all happening at once. First, thick, dense fog. Second, the airport has no modern landing system. Third, it's an uncontrolled airfield. And fourth, it's got what they call a tabletop runway, which is notoriously tricky. Any one of these is a challenge. All of them together, it's a deadly trap.
And this right here, this is absolutely crucial to understanding the pressure those pilots were under. On one side, you have a visual landing. You're literally relying on your own 2 eyes to land a jet in thick fog. On the other side is an instrument landing system, or ILS, which uses radio signals to guide a plane down safely, even in zero visibility. The problem? Baramati didn't have one. The pilots were essentially flying blind.
But the story doesn't end with the weather or the airport. Investigators also started looking at the company that operated the plane, VSR Ventures. And, when they started digging into their safety record, it got pretty concerning.
2. That's the number you need to remember. 2 serious incidents with the same type of plane from the same company in just 3 years. That 2023 incident in Mumbai, where a Learjet 45 skidded off a runway and broke in half, it was a terrifying preview of what was to come. And it raises some really serious questions about whether this company was cutting corners on safety.
So we've talked about the how and the why of the crash itself. But the impact of this event goes way beyond the wreckage. Ajit Pawar's death left a huge hole in the political world of Maharashtra, and it kicked off a period of real uncertainty. You really have to get who Ajit Pawar was to understand the fallout. This guy wasn't just another politician. He was a political force of nature. He served as Deputy Chief Minister 6 times. He had immense power and influence. His death wasn't just a loss. It was like a foundational piece of Maharashtra's political structure just vanished overnight.
As you'd probably expect when something this big happens, different stories started to emerge almost immediately. You had his uncle, Sharad Pawar, saying, look, it was a terrible accident, period. Then you have other political leaders hinting that maybe there was something more to it. But it's important to remember, the official investigation by the DGCA is focused squarely on that chain of errors we've been talking about.
So, the investigation will eventually give us answers about what happened in that cockpit.
But the much bigger question, the one that's a lot harder to answer, is what happens now? Ajit Pawar's death created a massive power vacuum, and politics, well, it hates a vacuum. The fight to fill that void is already underway, and you can be sure the shockwaves from this crash are going to be felt for a long, long time.